My name is Jake Field. I'm an expedition leader, adventure travel guide, and the founder of Ultimate Adventure Travel. Over the years, I have helped hundreds of people step out of their comfort zone and into some of the world's most incredible places: Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp, and the Inca Trail. But this podcast isn't just about the destinations, it's about what happens on the trail. The friendships you build, the challenges you overcome, and the confidence that you gain. So welcome to the Ultimate Adventure Travel Podcast. This is your weekly guide to preparing for unforgettable group adventures and getting the most out of every single one. In each episode, I'll share practical advice, inspiring stories from past travellers, and expert interviews. We'll cover training tips, altitude prep, packing, planning, mindset, and all the things no one tells you before you sign up. Whether you're planning your very first trip or you're the one in the group who's always got another adventure lined up, this podcast is here to help you feel confident, ready, and excited about what's ahead. So hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And if you want to get started today, you'll find free downloadable guides to some of our most popular trips linked in the show notes. Or head straight over to ultimateadventuretravel.co.uk to see where we're heading next. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. Jemima, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
So you and I have known each other for a couple of years now. We've both been working in the freelance world. I can't remember the exact event that we first met on, but since then you've been working with a number of different companies. We've crossed paths a few times on various jobs. And I know that you have now also started guiding on some international expeditions, which we both share a love for. So that's really exciting. But there's a big part of your life that is separate to the guiding and the adventure and the freelancing and all that sort of stuff. And recently you just completed an insanely cool challenge that I saw, and I was like, I have to speak to you about this. So for the people who are listening, what have you just been and done? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, so I have just completed the Varangia Arctic Kite Enduro with my sister Polly. And this is a competition that we have wanted to do for a long, long time. And yeah, we're just waiting for our moment, really. And the moment came, and we saw the applications come online, and we were like, okay, this is it. We've got to go for it. And luckily, our application was accepted. And then the months in between just went so quick. We kind of signed up on a whim, and then we're like, oh my gosh, okay, now we actually need to make this thing happen. We had none of the right equipment. We still had a few skills that were lacking a bit, and we had a few months to kind of bring it all together. And luckily, we managed to get everything together in the nick of time. But yeah, this trip expedition is essentially, you've got in the Arctic Circle in Norway, you've got the Varangia Peninsula, and you have 5 days to cross that peninsula by snow kite or by skis. And essentially you use your kite whenever there's wind, and when there's not enough wind, you're just using your skis and you're skinning. And you carry everything that you need in a sled or a couple of sleds, and in Norway they call them pulks or polkas. And you've got I think there are 30 other teams competing alongside us. And yeah, that's kind of it. And so you're fully self-sufficient, and you've got your camping things, and you kind of you've got waypoints along the way, but the route that you take between each waypoint is completely up to you, and it depends on so many different factors like the wind, the terrain, wind direction, and yeah, and then you have until at 9 p.m. every night you have to be in your tent, and you have to have stopped moving. So it's always like a big push to see like, oh, am I going to end up at the summit of something in 80-mile-an-hour winds in my tent in minus 20 degrees, or am I going to be in a valley? And so you're always kind of thinking about like that safety aspect of it. But yeah, that's it really.
That's amazing. But I'm really interested. And you said that this is something that you wanted to do for a long time, and you did it with your sister. So take me back a little bit. When did this first go on your radar? Why is it something that you decided to do with your sister? When did the dream of doing this really start? Because it sounds like it's been in the pipeline for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am from a family of kite surfers. I feel like I've been attached to a kite ever since I was a little kid. And so kite surfing is typically done on the water. And yeah, I'm the youngest of all of my sisters, and they basically started the sport, and I just thought it was absolutely cool and just had to get involved. So they were very much the pioneers, and I was just the lucky younger sister who got taken along on the ride. Um, and so that was kite surfing for us. But then we love skiing, and so the idea of mixing those two sports together was just like the ultimate dream. Using your kite on the snow with skis, and it's called snow kiting. And we'd done a little bit of it growing up, but we don't really, yeah, we don't live in the mountains or anything. We're very much British South Coast, not much snow around, and we do the kind of classic skiing once or twice a year kind of thing. So we hadn't done too much snow kiting growing up, but we had some friends in Europe who always inspired us. They were some kite surfing friends, but they were and still are exceptional snow kiters. So that's Florian Gruber, who is a German rider, and then we've got Jonas Lengweiler, who's from Switzerland. And we had seen them compete in this competition, and back then there wasn't too much media around it, but me and my sister had seen, I think there were some magazine articles, and we'd also we knew these riders, and we'd heard like little incredible adventure stories about their time doing this competition. And I think me and my sister just thought it was the coolest thing, and we couldn't quite believe the stories that they were telling us. By the time we'd got enough snow kiting experience and we were out of school and actually ready to do the competition, sadly they put the competition on hold for quite a few years, I think through COVID. And then the organisers, they also had a family of their own, so they kind of took time out to raise their children, and it's incredible. It's this kind of power couple in Norway who run and organise this incredible event, and they organise it so well. And it's all because of them and their kind of vision that this event is a reality, really. But yeah, and then fast forward to October 2024, when suddenly we see this thing come online saying entries open, and that was when I messaged Polly. I was like, Polly, it's time. Our dream is going to come true. And then we messaged our friends, Jonas and Flo, the guys who had won it year after year, to be like, are we crazy for entering? And they were like, no, it's the best thing ever. Like, come join. So yeah, we applied, the application got approved, and there we are. So that's the story.
So it very nearly didn't happen then. This was something that you were quite keen to go and do, and then they cancelled it. And it was really just by, chance noticing that they'd put it back up, and it was a quick dash to make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so.
I do want to go back to one thing that you said, because knowing you and knowing that you are an incredibly humble person, you've completely skated over some of your achievements there. I think you've downplayed it massively by saying you're just the youngest sister that happens to like kite surfing. That's not quite true, isn't it? You do a decent amount of kite surfing in your own right. Are you able to share with us a little bit about your achievements there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So my sisters are very much the pioneers. I think so the journey started where my middle sister Polly, she loved doing freestyle, and so me and her would do freestyle kiting, and she would learn a trick, and I would try and kind of copy her, and we were such good like training partners, and that was what we did kind of growing up, throughout school and a little bit into uni. And we would do the British tour, and then we did the Europeans, and then Polly went on to do other international competitions. And we did all right. Polly became British champion, and I was the like the amateur champion, and we just kind of loved competing but never did it like really really seriously. And then when I was at uni, this kind of talent scouting thing again just like this advert for it came up on some form of social media somewhere, and it was basically the British sailing team were advertising for this program called the Kite for Gold program, where essentially kite surfing had finally been accepted into the Olympics, but it wasn't kite surfing as we know it. It wasn't freestyle. It was hydrofoil, or like kite surfing on a hydrofoil, and it was the racing format, which is much more similar to sailing. And I had always seen people kiting on hydrofoils and always thought like that's the coolest thing, but it was always a piece of equipment that was slightly out of my price range, and it was always kind of a dream of like, oh, I'd like to try that, but I couldn't afford it at the time and just kind of stuck with freestyle. But then when I saw this opportunity come along, I was like, oh my goodness, like my sport is going to be in the Olympics. This is so cool. And then I was like, oh, hang on, but I'm doing a degree and I'm halfway through uni, and maybe I shouldn't sign this application. And then it was literally like, I think it was 2 hours before the deadline, where a few different friends messaged me and they were like, have you applied yet? Like you're so stupid for not even trying. And then I was like, yeah, you know what? I am stupid. Like I might as well apply and try, and you never know where this will lead. And I'm sure I can work out the uni thing when it happens. And I, like, those friends, I have since gone back and just like said how grateful I am to them, because it honestly, that decision to fill out that application literally changed my life in so many ways that I can't even comprehend. And it's just one of those, like, I don't know, sliding doors moments where you're like, I'm thanking my past self for making that decision to just to fill out a form. So everyone out there, if you are making a decision to fill out a form, just fill out the form, and you never know where it will take you. But this form took me places, because I got accepted into the initial intake of Kite for Gold, and it was a squad of girls, and none of us could actually do the hydrofoiling side of kite surfing, and actually 2 of the girls couldn't even kite surf. So we spent a few months kind of getting up to speed and learning this new form of kite surfing, of kite foiling. And after a matter of months, we all just absolutely got the bug, really loved it. For me, I was like, this is my dream, because I love going fast on the water on my normal kite surfboard, but the foil just unlocks speeds like you don't even know. And so that was really cool. And basically over that was like the first couple of months, and then the 5 of us got kind of selected full-time onto the British sailing team. So then we became Britain's first ever female kitefoil squad, and that then just like ended up in, well, I guess the last 5 years of my life just being full-time athlete on the team, kite foiling on the world circuit, doing world championships, world tours. I managed to finish my degree at the same time, which was really hard. So I did mechanical engineering at Bristol, and I ended up just kind of doing it was my dissertation year. They were super, super kind and supportive, and managed to let me split that final year into 2. So it was like a lighter load. And it was really fun, because I got to do my dissertation on kite foiling, and it was quite a fun like software development coding dissertation with a bit of lab work, which I did out in the field being the water with my teammates, testing different foils and theories and stuff. And so everything just kind of fell into place and came hand in hand. And so I competed full time, and absolutely loved my squad. Got lots of results I'm really, really proud of. And the aim was always to go to the Olympics, but they only the way the format works is they select one female and one male from each country to represent the UK. And in the end, I didn't quite reach the mark, and my teammate Ellie Aldridge ended up being selected, which was literally the perfect turn of events, because she is the best, and she got the gold medal. So it all kind of worked out, and it's one of those things where like you put your life and soul into a goal, but sometimes you don't reach it, and that's okay, and it's kind of amazing feeling part of helping someone else reach their goal and having that same goal, if that makes sense. But it was really cool because I was actually the kite caddy for Ellie at the Olympics, so it was yeah, that was I would say one of the best moments of my life, weirdly, when she came through that line first and she had done it, and I was literally in tears on the beach, like proud friend. And yeah, and so after that kind of Olympic cycle, I then made the decision to kind of park that and try my hand at a few other things and a few other sports that I had kind of put to one side, like paragliding and again picking up snow kiting again, and bits and bobs. And I still kite foil most days and still try and be involved with coaching the British youth team every now and then and doing bits and bobs. And I commentated for the tour for a little bit, so yeah, still I'm just giving you my life story now. But yeah, that's kind of essentially that's it. And then
No, that's
now
perfect.
I'm an engineer again, and I do lots of different jobs really, but the main one being an engineer and a bit of trekking guiding and mountain guiding, and yeah, sort of lots of random jobs, to be honest.
No, that's perfect. You really have had so many different jobs over such a short space of time, and all of them have just sounded like the most incredible experiences. The commentary that you started doing with the kite foiling and the teaching and the coaching, and the fact that you were at the Olympics, I was following that journey through social media, and it all looked absolutely incredible. And I saw when you put up about Ellie winning the gold medal and just how pleased you were, because it was really representative of that team effort, not just as an incredible effort that individual effort was. I think it was really important as well how much that team was involved, and it was fantastic that you got to go. So yeah, I was really keen for you not to just skim over some of the accomplishments beforehand. And I think to anyone listening as well, this should probably highlight just how challenging what you went to go and do next really was. This challenge that you and your sister had seen, it wasn't, a completely spur of the moment, off the cuff decision that you've never, you know, kite surfed or anything before. This is something that you've got quite a lot of experience in. And we're going to go now into just how challenging that was for you, because I know before we jumped on the podcast, we were having a bit of a catch up about it. And you were saying that one of the big challenges with this event is that the winds change direction so much. And that's something that I necessarily hadn't thought about. But in that environment, there's so many things that the wind would need to go around or would change the direction of it. What was the biggest challenge, though, that you found whilst you were on that event? Was it the wind or was it something else?
Well, that is such a good question. I'm gonna think. I feel like I should know that answer already, but there were so many different aspects to it. But I guess to kind of to lay it out in terms of the other of the various challenges, and then hopefully I'll kind of decide on which one was the biggest challenge. But I think you're so right in saying that, like, everything I've done over these past years really did feel like it was leading to this. And I think Polly would say the same. And it was really cool, our kind of various skills coming hand in hand. And anything I was lacking, Polly would know how to do. And likewise, anything she was lacking in skill, hopefully I was able to cover. And so I think we were a really wonderful team in that sense. And yeah, I can't even explain it. It's I think this is why I love this event so much, because it just feels so me and so us, in the way you have like at the very base of it, it's kites, it's kite surfing. That's what I love. And then you add in the challenge of as you say, of the wind and the wind direction. So if you're kite surfing on the sea, there'll often be some funky things happening in terms of wind on the course, and it will cause the wind to shift, and that influences your decision if you go left or right up the course to the windward mark and how you kind of play that. Whereas if you imagine that mapped out over miles and miles of mountainous terrain with wind kind of coming over the plateau, but then it will bend around mountains, over mountains, and you'll kind of go up a mountain with the wind coming one way, and then you'll come down it and it will either disappear or dump or rotor. And I'm used to that in paragliding, because paragliding, if you're doing cross country, you're thinking about that all the time in terms of you never want to be in rotor, because that's not a good thing. In paragliding, that equals falling out the sky. So I'm quite switched on with kind of thinking about how land affects the wind, but usually it's quite simple, because I don't know how to explain it. Like in the sky, it's still 3D, but it feels a bit more like 2D, and you're above everything and you can kind of anticipate what's going to happen a lot more. And then likewise, when you're in the water, again, I would say that feels a lot simpler. Whereas when you're in the mountains with a kite on, you've got like 30-meter lines, it feels like all of those things are combined in a way. I don't think I've explained that very well. If anyone who paraglides or kites, they'll be like, she's not explaining that very well. It's all 3D, 4D.
To me, you've explained it brilliantly, because I can now build up a picture of what it was starting to look like for you on the ground, because I can only relate to it from the pictures that I've seen. And the pictures that I've seen, you know, for anyone listening, to try and paint that picture, what you were putting up was insane snowstorms that seemed to be coming across. You were in full Arctic gear. You were dressed as I would imagine somebody would be to cross the Arctic. But then, as well as that, you've got these huge kites that you're having to manage as well. You've got the big gloves on. I mean, that must have been a challenge in itself, having to operate everything in such
Absolutely.
big gloves. That would have taken a lot of time to get used to. So, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you firstly, because I want to go into what a day by day looks like for you, but how did you prepare for an event like this? Obviously, you've got the kite surfing experience, you've got that experience in handling the equipment, but with the challenges of it being in such an extreme environment, did you have to spend quite a lot of time preparing for the environment itself, not necessarily the skills needed to cross it? What was that looking like for you?
That's a great question. So obviously we knew that it had potential to be incredibly cold. So people had said that some years it had been down to minus 30 degrees Celsius. And I think one year they'd even had to kind of emergency call everyone down from the mountain because it was just too cold. And you have the kind of base temperature, but then you have the wind chill on top of that. And when it's even windier, it can just be absolutely brutal. And I think me and Polly, we basically just didn't know what to expect because we had experienced extreme cold before. But we hadn't really for quite a while. So we were like, okay, what's this going to look like? And how can we train so it's not a surprise? And we thought, well, the best way to train is you just go to the venue that you're going to go to. But with our jobs and schedules, it was basically all kind of coming down to we only had 4 days that we could line up with each other between being away and working. And we were like, okay, we need to go to Norway in these 4 days that we have, and we'll just take whatever weather is thrown at us. And I think the main aim of that trip was to find out, like, you don't know what you don't know, if that makes sense. And so we wanted to find out like what we were missing really, and if the equipment we had was good enough. And at that point, we didn't actually own any snow kites. So we were really on the hunt for like the correct equipment. And we really didn't have much equipment at all, actually. So we were like, okay, we need to do a whole bunch of like kit ordering. So we need to just do this recce trip. And we couldn't quite make it all the way up to the exact spot, but we could go to southern Norway in this it's like the snow kiting mecca called Hardangervidda, and it was the perfect kind of recce trip, because we did literally get every kind of wind, like breeze, and like weather condition as well. So we had light winds and super hectic strong winds. And I think the crazy thing in the strong wind was, we were like, if we were on water, we'd never even dream of going in that kind of breeze. It was like 50 knots, and you could barely stand upright, and you could barely see your hands in front of your face. Like when the storm comes in, it just is all thick around you, and your viz gets super low. And then we just would kind of ask the other snow kiters and be like, would you go in this weather? And a few of them were like, yeah, you just take a small kite. And we were like, oh, okay. So if these guys go in this weather, we need to be able to go in this weather. And really kindly, the Haugestor where we were staying, they let us try out some small kites. And we tried a 4-meter kite, and we're both a bit scared of launching it, so I kind of held on to Polly, and we both kind of anchored down, and we kind of learned these new launching techniques, that it was a bit opposite to what you do on land, so it was like just different skills really. And we had a few snow kiting friends who took us out in the mountains and helped us kind of get used to more kind of expedition level snow kiting, whereas we had only done, I would say, like recreational kiting, and we'd done it in nice conditions, whereas they helped us kind of get into the more extreme conditions. And we were super lucky with getting the really gnarly weather, because we very quickly realized that our layers that we had just weren't effective enough, and we realized that we needed smaller kites than we thought, as well as bigger kites than we thought, and the type of kite is very specific. So we ended up teaming up with a brand called Ozone, who make these absolutely fantastic snow kites, which have this fifth line system, which basically, if the wind picks up and you're caught out on a too big kite and you're really powered and you need to land, you can just pull this fifth line and the kite really safely collapses, and it's all good to go and nice and neat for the next time you want to get it out. And especially when you've got a sled and lots of things behind you, you don't want to be landing the other person's kite for them, because that can get quite complicated. Whereas in normal kiting, that's the usual way of landing kites. So just having that ability to self-land really safely made a massive difference, because we had moments in the actual competition where you're like literally on a really steep slope, really slippy, and you might have like wind rotoring over the mountain and be in a bit of a situation where you're like, I really need to get this kite down, or maybe something will be wrong. And just having that ability to do that is everything, as well as the performance. So these kites weren't just safe, they could go upwind really well, and downwind and crosswind, and whatever you needed from them, they could do it, as well as the wind range, because that was another thing that's super kind of tactical, is knowing what kites to bring. So you have different kite sizes, but you want to keep the weight light. So you want as few kites as possible, but you want to cover the wind range, and you might want to launch one kite, or you might end up having to launch one kite at the beginning of the day and having to stay on that kite no matter what wind you get. So again, Ozone do this epic little 5-meter, which we took it into crazy storms. I'm pretty sure we took it into 60 knots at points, which are like, thinking back on, I'm like, how is that possible? And then we could also hang on to it for, I think we took it down to 6 knots, and it could still just, like, you've got your heavy equipment that you're carrying in your sled, and it can take you miles. Likewise with the 15-meter, we could hang on to that into quite big breeze as well. And if you've got, this is all quite technical, but if you've got long lines, you can use that in really light wind. So the whole kite size thing was big decisions, and but that recce trip really helped. And so basically what we got out of that trip was knowing what we didn't have, knowing having a lot clearer idea of what we needed. And then kind of hitting go on this kite order, knowing that actually the timings were going to be quite tight before the actual event. And that's a whole story in itself, with with chasing down FedEx and having quite an exciting time, getting our kites to arrive on time, which maybe I'll write a book about that one day. But that was the adventure before the adventure, really. But yeah, anyway, luckily the kites did arrive, and I think one of the biggest things that me and Polly are happy with is actually after doing the event, we looked at all of the equipment decisions we had made, like including everything down to our gloves and layers, tent choice, all of that. And I don't think we would change a thing. There's maybe a few things we would add in, but I think we were so happy. Like, so I guess so many people can relate to that agonizing thing, right? Before you go on an adventure of like, oh, do I buy this or this? Like, equipment choices are so hard, and you can spend hours on the internet on like review websites, asking people about stuff and being like, just getting into a bit of a hole of like putting things into your online basket and then never quite clicking buy because you're like, oh, is this the right decision? But I think it's sometimes a good thing agonizing over those decisions, because it does often work out, and like going with your gut definitely helps. And this was a real kind of validation of those decisions, I think, by the end of it, when we looked at all of that and we were like, yeah, no, we nailed it. Actually, we were never cold, even in the coldest of conditions. Our tent took an absolute beating, but it felt like a cozy palace inside. So equipment, absolutely huge.
I think you've got enough to write several books, quite frankly, on the adventures that you've had. Not just on this particular one, although you could probably do a couple just on this. But I think of all of the stuff that we've been talking about today, and then the things that we don't even have anywhere near enough time to cover, because you really have packed so much in. So it sounds like the build up to it was quick. Once you'd made the decision to go, it sounds like it all happened really, really quickly. And with 4 days that you could actually really simulate the environment that you were in, and the rest was preparation back at home. It sounds like it was going to be a steep learning curve once you finally got out there. Can you give me an overview of the entire event? So I know you said it was 5 days long, but what was the distance that you were covering within that? What was the event itself?
So the event, because obviously it depends on, if you're going upwind, you'll be tacking lows and lows, whereas if you're going downwind, you're doing like longer, deeper angles, and you can cover, you can do less distance to go more distance, if that makes sense. So the overall distance ends up being anything from like 350 up to 500 kilometers, I think. Maybe some days you'd cover as few as like 20 kilometers, but then you could have massive days where you could cover 250, and it all depends on the wind and what situation you get yourself into. So, and every day throws a different challenge, and it's crazy how time just gets away from you. So you have this window of 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. where you're allowed to be moving, and then outside those hours you have to stop. And you can do anything you can to like be ready to have your kite up at 7 a.m. and be going, but there always seems to be something, like some kind of curveball that will come in the way. And I think what the winners do really well is they have done quite a few years of it, so they know a bit more, like those random curveballs aren't so random to them anymore, and they've managed to mitigate those things. And it's definitely one of the things where Polly and I, after the event, looked back and were like, right, what were all these things that we can do better next time? But in the moment, they're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And for me, that just sums up racing in its essence. And I kind of love that stuff. But so each day, so it starts in the town, in this little town, and you've got all of the young children of the town come out, and they've all got flags, and you start on skis and skins. And so you don't have kites at the moment. You're in a town, and then it's like 3, 2, 1, go. And you're kind of going as fast as you can on skis, and you wiggle through the town and then up onto the plateau to the launching area. And then it's a big race to get your kites launched, and then you're kind of up and away. And so the first day, we were really happy with how we were going on the skis at the beginning, because you've got these super tall Norwegians who in one step of their step is like 10 of your steps, and they're so strong and tall, and we were like, oh, a bit daunted by it. But I think we would say that we held our own up the hill, and we're really proud of like the physical training we'd done to be able to get to that point of like dragging these bulks up this like super steep like onto the up and onto the plateau. And then you get launched, and it was up and away, and that first chunk of kiting was going super, super well. We're pretty stoked, and it was so cool because that's the part of the event where everyone's still quite close and together. So it's just, you've got kites everywhere, and you can see people like breaking off, going slightly different routes, and it's like, oh, do we follow them, or do we stick with our guns and what we think is best? And it's quite interesting. There was a moment where the wind just completely died, and you could just see kites dropping like a kind of dominoes effect. And it's so hard because you see a few kites dropping and you're like, right, we need to not follow them because there's obviously no wind there. And then you go slightly different direction, but you see other kites dropping, and it's just like this impending doom coming towards you, like, we're going to be hit with the no wind. And so then on that first day, that definitely lost us a lot of time, but it kind of lost everyone. It hit everyone, so everyone's kites were down in that moment. And then we tried to get up and skiing again, and then suddenly the wind came back, so then it's like relaunched, and then you're just building up the kilometers again. And then you go, like, you hit the first checkpoint and you go down this super, super steep valley where that was one of the best moments of the event, because you could see like for miles across this plateau. And it just, for me, that reminded me of Interstellar, the film, where they're on that other planet and you just see like these like snowy mountains everywhere, and it's like that part felt like another world. And it was amazing because Polly, I think, hit the top speed of her life down that valley, and I've never seen her go so fast. And then you go up the other side to what I would call Mount Doom, and this was our first major challenge because it's this really steep climb, and you're in the lee side of the wind, so you're basically in the shadow of the wind, but you have wind dumping on top of your kite. So your kite is acting super weird, the wind is doing weird things, and you're up a really steep slope. So you need to keep the kite really moving. And basically both Polly and I, we got to different heights on that hill, but eventually both of our kites went down, and everyone else around us had the same situation where nobody could actually get up to the top of Mount Doom. So then you're on skis and skinning up the steepest slope I've ever skinned up, and that took like a really, really long time. And eventually we get to the top, and then suddenly speeding up again, like eating up the kilometers. In that, I think, was one of the most beautiful points for me. And then I think we hit another few checkpoints, and then eventually get to it's like coming in on 9 o'clock, and basically what was happening was a polar low was gonna hit us. So the safety team had already told all of us that the next day we had to stay in our tents until 2 p.m. So they were going to do a delayed start. So we were like, okay, we need to be smart with where we're camping here. So it was like, do we push on to the top of the next kind of mountain, or do we actually stop at 8:40? Well, I think it was 8:30 to the bottom of the mountain, where we'll be a lot safer with this massive storm incoming. And there are a few other teams around us who had made that decision, and we went on a little bit. And then, when you just get that gut feeling of like, actually, I don't feel like I'm making a good decision here. So then we actually turned back and came, and we hadn't gone too high up the mountain, but it was dark and we had head torches at this point. And I knew that there were gullies around, and we weren't super familiar with the terrain. So we were both like, okay, we're happy to call it, set up a tent, and then we did. And setting up the tent in snow is not like summer camping. Like my tent in summer, I can do now in like literally 3 minutes. I can do that super fast. This scenario takes about an hour and a half, maybe even longer, because you're digging super deep into the snow. Then you have to create a snow wall. And this was an amazing moment. We had these Norwegians around us who just created this amazing, like they can make these amazing ice blocks where I literally don't know how they do it, but yeah, they were busy building an igloo around their tent. Meanwhile, me and Polly were like making this like little wall that was taking forever to build. But it's super important because it basically protects your tent from being absolutely ripped into by the wind. And then you have to make snow anchors for the pegs all around, and it's quite fun. It's like a little bit of evening problem solving when you're incredibly tired and and can barely dig, but it gets you nice and warm again before bed. And yeah, it just kind of is what it is. And this is the lovely thing about doing it with my sister is when it's super super windy and you can't hear each other talk, but we never really needed that communication because we just knew what each other needed, and we had our roles, and you just kind of crack on really. And we had our various roles of the putting up of the tent. Like she would hold this, I would hold that, and I'd put the poles in, she'd do this, and it was just this kind of seamless flow. So that was really lovely, and I'm really grateful for that. And then finally got the tent up, and then it was just going to bed and waiting for this storm to really 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 hit. So you just kind of hunker down, and then it really boomed. But we were really happy with how we had prepared our tent that night, and I think that was a real lesson of like it's worth putting in that extra half an hour of graft of digging, because then you're in a really solid tent. Whereas we had heard later that other teams, their tents had exploded and their like poles had broken, and they basically had no tent left, and some people had to abandon the race after that night because their tents hadn't survived. But yeah, and then anyway, the next day we get up at get our kites up at 2 p.m. on the dot with some of the other teams, and it's an absolute whiteout. But luckily the wind is a bit softer, still a complete upper limit. We were on our 5 meters again. But this was like, I felt like, the mountain leaders course, and when you do your whiteout navigation or your night nav, I felt like everything I'd put into doing that course was leading to this moment, because it was whiteout nav, but rather than doing it in like one step at a time of pacing, you're moving at like super high speeds on your kite, and again you're navigating like, oh, there's a gully there, or oh, there's a gorge there, and a cliff top there, and you just cannot work out what's up or what's down, and the only reference you have is like the pull on your kite, and that helps you know kind of if you're going upwind or downwind. And so long as the wind is consistent, you have that reference point. But it's so crazy because you can have moments where you're kind of like, oh, whoa, the ground has come towards me, or have I come towards the ground? And when you're doing it for hours on end, that whiteout stuff can just mess with your mind. But anyway, it was really cool kind of navigating. I loved that bit so much, just navigating this whiteout and finally getting to the first checkpoint of that day and being like, oh my goodness, like we did it. And then it started to clear, and then we made it to the next one, and kind of each day had its different challenges. But I remember with that one actually getting we were super underpowered for some of the day, and then we got super stacked for the next part of the afternoon, and we were basically just on the downhills. We were essentially just flying down these hills with a bit of airtime. It's kind of, yeah, you'll be going really fast down the hill, and suddenly your skis will just lift off the ground, and then you'll just be flying and with your pulk just dragging on behind you. And so it got quite exciting, and me and Polly, I remember coming through that checkpoint line, like we were coming in so fast and just like screaming in, and it was really fun. But but yeah, and then the next day again was another crazy whiteout. But this day, this I think I would say is one of the biggest challenges of my life, really. It was, whiteout, where you have to get up to this plateau, and then to get to the checkpoint you want to get to, you have to navigate. I think in the end it was 7 hours of like super precise navigation where how do I describe this? You've basically got you go up into the mountains, and then you've got a big plateau with like a little bottleneck squeeze where you'll have two really crazy gorges either side that you could just drop into, and then it goes onto another plateau, and again, and you have to navigate to get to these exact bottleneck, I guess I'll call them bottlenecks, and like link them all together to be able to get to that checkpoint. And there was about 9 of them, and I was navving that day, and so Polly was following me, and it got quite exciting because the first one, and again, like whiteout, you're going really fast and you're doing this high speed navigation, and I hit the first one a little bit too fast and I got it slightly wrong, and I basically, 1 minute I was there, the next minute I wasn't. And from Polly's perspective, she thought I had just fallen off a cliff, because 1 minute she could see me, and then the next minute my kite, like it was a full kite's length, because the kite, I disappeared and the kite disappeared below or what she thought was a cliff. And in my perspective, I just remember doing like a full somersault and like absolute crash land wallop, and I think my kite helped me like gently fall into the top of this gorge. And I just kind of, you do like that body check of like, oh, okay, I don't think anything's broken, but maybe I haven't realised it yet and it will be broken later. And then Polly like whizzes over and she's like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I don't know how I got away with that. And then and that was a real lesson of like, okay, these gorges are no mess. I need to be really on it with my nav, and I have to nail this. And then, so it's a bit of a reality check. And then I managed to climb out of the gorge. And again, it's super cool with a kite, because even if you're going up a really steep cliff, you just use the power of the kite to like lift you like an elevator. And so I managed to get up and out, and then continues this like 7-hour shift of going upwind all the way up and managing to hit these bottlenecks perfectly. And again, because it's whiteout, for Polly's perspective behind, without having the GPS in front of her or the map, it just feels like you're going in this like endless like open white space and just going on through. Whereas what I can see is like I'm holding my breath, being like, okay, gorge to the left, gorge to the right, we're hitting the bottleneck here, okay, now we're free, on to the next one. And we managed to do it successfully all the way up to within touching distance of this checkpoint. And it then suddenly something just goes really funky with our kites, and I'm like, this is so weird, I can feel the wind but I just can't fly my kite. And we then both land them, and it was actually just such a nice breather, being like, oh, okay, we can stop after doing like a solid shift. Like I don't think I drank or ate or anything. It was like you're in another world of concentration mode. And I and then we went to our kites and realised our whole kites were frozen. So every single bridle had ice around it, like a centimetre diameter of ice, and you had these big frozen golf balls inside the kites, and so they just couldn't fly. And so we were like, okay, that's a new one. We need to defrost the kites. And then by the time we'd realised that, the GPS we were using, that had also frozen, and our phones weren't charging anymore. And it was just like, it was a super cold day, like really stormy, and it was not a day for electronics, let's say. Everything froze. And so then I was like, oh, it's all good, I've got my trusty map and compass. And so then the next shift was done with like pure mountain leader style map and compass, which was definitely a challenge at speed, and also having to hit these like exact points. And then that day was complicated for a whole load of reasons, of like having again, a time limit, and there was another storm incoming. So it was like, okay, from a safety point of view, where do we want to get ourselves to, and actually, do we have the ability to do that? Like, now it's getting to the end of the day. Like, my concentration was really, really good at the beginning, but now it's going, and I'm really worried about being as accurate as I was earlier. So we made this decision to hit the checkpoint and then to camp just the other side of just down from the ridge, in what I thought would be the safest possible place to camp, because you want to be out of range of any possible avalanche risk, and you want to be there's a lot of considerations really that you need to take into account when a storm's coming. And the confusing thing about this particular checkpoint is there's only one or two ways to get to the next one, and you have to go back where you came from. So it was like back through the maze of these gorges, and we were like, the time is coming down, we don't want to end up in a gorge, so let's just call it for the day, and then we'll hit tomorrow fresh. And we timed it so well, because we were mid putting tent up when the storm hit, and it came in full force. And it was one of those things that if we were holding onto that tent so tight when we were putting it up, and if someone had let it go, it would be gone into the world. So luckily we managed to put it up, and I just cannot even describe the wind. And at that point, everything had frozen. Like, the tent poles had basically frozen, and our gloves were frozen in like a kite bar holding position. And it was so cold, and we couldn't cook that night because, again, everything had frozen. And we were like, oh, it's fine. We'll just, like, we're feeling quite sleepy after that massive day. So and it's probably going to be a long night. So we'll just have a nap now, and then we'll wake up and tackle food later. And then we actually slept really, really well, and ended up waking up in the morning ready to go again. Let the defrosting process begin. And then that day was epic, because the fog had lifted, the storm had lifted, and the views were just insane. And I know I'm talking a lot, but basically, yeah, that day had another challenge in itself, with a tricky gorge crossing where there was like literally one possible place to cross, and pretty sketchy, but we managed to get across it. And yeah, and then just had this epic day of racing. There was another team that we ended up kind of finding and meeting again, and we just kept on bouncing like away and together at each checkpoints, and we would get there first, and then they'd get there first to the next one, and we did that all the way to the final cut-off point, which sadly we didn't make it quite in time to be able to go to the finish. But only 10 teams out of the 30 actually did, and we were incredibly proud to just get as far as we did, and to make it to the final cutoff was more than we imagined, really. We thought we'd barely make the first cutoff point. So yeah, that's kind of the waffly sum of it. Yeah. Any questions?
That is an incredible story of the whole event. I obviously haven't had the chance to speak to you about the ins and outs of the event until now, so that was quite incredible to hear. And I had loads of questions throughout the way, but then you were answering them as we were going, and it was like this story that, I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? You've fallen down the thing. And I didn't know about the cutoff. I didn't know how far you got as well. So yeah, I can see why you've now said that to date, that's probably one of the most challenging things that you've done. I think for me, the big question is something that you said right at the beginning, and you just, again, skimmed over it very, very quickly, but you said, we'll be better prepared next time. Are you planning on going back? So after all of this, are you
Sure.
still planning on going back?
Yeah, definitely. I think we didn't want it to end. We were, even though it's like one of those brutal things, and you're so cold like the whole time, and you got all of these like tough things that you're going through. I think we just loved it in a weird way. And we just, basically, before we'd even finished the first competition, we were already planning the next one, and I would love to do it every single year of my life if it's still going. And I'd love to do it with my sister as well. I think it was such a special thing to do together. And yeah.
Well, did you find that made a difference then, being able to do it with your sister, where you've already got a working bond? It's not just that you two get on really, really well. You've actually worked with each other in difficult environments before, in situations where they are high pressure environments, especially doing the kite surfing together. So is that a team that you're quite keen to keep going then throughout these challenges?
100%. Yeah, I think this is the key. Is I I knew that like partnerships and teamwork is vital in any kind of walk of life, but this was the absolute epitome of that. And I think I just feel so lucky to have nailed it in one, basically, and like to have found my dream teammate. And I think, yeah, definitely there's something about that sister relationship where in these harsh environments there, I think a lot of people can second guess the other person if they're just a friend or you don't know them on that kind of deeper level. It's easy to take things personally, or like if you need to get a message across quickly, especially in the wind when you can't really hear each other very well. And we didn't have radio communication. We just did a lot of things on like thumbs up and like nods and telepathy. But I think that was really special, like because there was a team who quit, and they were like, oh, we quit because our comms stopped working, as in like their radios. And we were like, huh, we didn't even have radios. And for them, obviously, that was a deal breaker. But definitely, yeah, being able to not take things personally and to be able to understand your partner on a deeper level. And I think that's why Jonas and Flo are such a dream team, is like we could see that from the offset. Like they just work so well together. And there were definitely certain teams that you could really, that they were standout, where you're like, you have found each other as a pair, and you work so well, and this is one of the big reasons why you're doing well. And likewise, you could see other teams who are maybe having a trickier time, and maybe a different pairing would be a different story. And yeah, I think it's just one of those things, and that goes across life in many different scenarios. Yeah.
So what's the big thing that you would change for next time then? If you had to pick one thing that you really learned that you're definitely going to change for the next time you do it, what would that be? I'm sure there's lots and lots and lots, because you said just how much you learned on this trip, but was there one thing?
Well, that's such a good question. What was the biggest thing? I think the biggest thing would be more of a technical thing. So the connection from your sled to your harness. What we had going on was literally just two carabiners that we would clip on to a rope loop, which sounds really simple, but when you've got big gloves and loads of layers, and you've got a kite in the air, and so the kite control usually isn't too much of a drama, and me and Polly are quite good at controlling a kite with one hand. But when you're in the mountains and it's super fluky, and you've got this high aspect ratio foil kite that wants to overfly, wiggle around, go into loops and do all sorts, you have to really be on it with the kite control. And often on land, it's easy because you can like kind of run backwards or run forwards, and you move your body quite a bit with the kite if it does something rogue. But when you're on thick, deep snow, you can't run backwards or forwards. So ideally, you want to be able to clip on your harness or have it already clipped on when you launch to be able to then get away. But we had the scenario where we would launch the kite, which would often if in light wind, it would take a bit of running backwards. And so you didn't want your sled attached. So you'd run backwards, launch the kite, and then we'd put our skis on and harness on. But by that time, if you're being still with the kite above your head is not a very good place to be, because that's when it could like fall down, and then suddenly you've got the whole faff of resetting out your lines and launching it again. So I think a system like an easy quick release system, basically. So yeah, sled mods, basically. Something that is just, yeah, so you're not kind of searching around your harness with your eyes shut, essentially, with big gloves trying to click something on. Or just practice, I think, because we'd done lots of snow kiting, but we hadn't necessarily done loads with sleds. So I think that's something that could actually maybe just come with time. But I like getting technical and I like making stuff. So I think it would be quite fun to do a bit of a makeshift solution for that one. But yeah, that was definitely, I think that could make us some games.
Because it is fully self-supported, isn't it? You carry all your own
Yeah.
food, you carry all your
Yeah.
own equipment, and as you were saying, the weight really makes a big difference. Is there a weight restriction, or is it just up to you to make it as light or as heavy as you want?
Yeah, so there's actually a minimum weight limit. So the minimum weight limit is, now this is a funny story. So the minimum weight limit is 38 kilos in your sled without kites, and that's 38 kilos between the two of you, whereas me and Polly read it as 38 kilos each. So we were there with like, oh, we've nailed it. Like both of our sleds, like they weigh exactly 38 kilos, like amazing. And then when you're in this like big sports hall to begin with and you do all these weigh-ins, and we had a few people, other team members, like come to us and be like, oh, like how much did you guys weigh in? And we'd be like nailed it, 38 kilos each. And then me and Polly, after a while, we were like, you know, when you read people's faces and you're like, they just look a bit worried for us. And then we asked one of them, we were like, is that what yours weighs? And then they said like, oh no, mine's like in 20 something. And then me and Polly were like, okay, we need to double check this. And then we realized that we had just got it completely wrong. So in that moment, we were like, right, we can get rid of so much of this stuff. And so there was, again, like some really last minute, like kit changes. We managed to pretty much, well, we didn't fully halve it. I think we got down to 40 kilos between us. But we got rid of a lot of weight and then made a few like kit swaps between us. And I think then when you add in the kites, and we only had a 3 kite quiver, whereas some people had 4 or 5 kites each, and a lot bigger kites and heavier kites, whereas our snow kites were really nice and lightweight. So actually on the lightweight side of it, I think we did a really, really good job of that. And it definitely helped out, like in the long run, over the 5 days, you really feel that weight. And especially when you're going up the first bit, the super steep bit, and you're just dragging it all behind you. But yeah, no, it was good. But the whole weight thing's so funny. The guys that won in the end, we asked them as a joke. We were like, "Oh, do you like cut your toothbrush in half, or like go for one of the mini toothpastes?" And then they just looked at us and they're like, "What? We don't do our teeth for the whole for that whole event. Like, yeah, that's a luxury. You don't need that." So they go
Oh,
fully
wow.
extreme. No toothbrush. Yeah.
Yeah, see, now I've heard this all the time, especially, doing what we do and with the expeditions and
Yeah.
working in those kind of environments, especially with climbers. Climbers, I find, are always the ones that are cutting things in half and trying to skimp and save on all the weight. But I have never heard it where somebody's turned around and gone, "Oh yeah, just don't bother." So
Yeah.
everyone's
Yeah.
talking about cutting the toothbrush in half, but yeah, I guess these guys are like, no, just don't take it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's
They are extreme.
I can just picture your face now as you turned up and you've got these and you really, yeah, we got it bang on, because you're quite good when there's a brief, you hit it bang on. I can just
Yeah. Yeah.
imagine you looking around the room going, it doesn't quite make sense. Mm, Well, I'm going to ask you a couple of final questions because I could quite comfortably talk to you about this for a ridiculously long amount of time, because I find it fascinating what you've been through, and I know that you're going to be doing some epic stuff coming up. And if you do when you get around to doing this again, that's going to be amazing second time around, and I would love to have you back on to be talking about more stuff as well. It'd be really cool to chat to you about some of the other stuff that you're doing, and the adventures that you've been guiding and leading and your experience of all that stuff. So if you're open to it, I would love to have you back on the podcast and we can have more epic conversations. But what I'm what I'm going to almost finish with. I've got two questions after this. But I'm really keen to know what's next for you in terms of your adventures coming up.
Oh,
Are you
good
able to
question.
say? Because sometimes you can't say.
Um,
I know there's a few things that you keep quite under wraps, but what's next for you?
I would say most of my adventures are quite spontaneous. I almost don't know they're happening until they're happening. Um, uh, yeah. So in terms of personal ones, I've definitely got a few dreams, and I think I'll keep them tucked up my sleeve for now. Um, but it's something I'm really excited for, which isn't necessarily a personal adventure, but it's something. It's a place I haven't been before, but I'll be guiding to K2 base camp in a couple of months, and I am so overjoyed to be doing that trip. And I've wanted to go there for a really long time, and I think it's just one of the most amazing parts of the world, really. And yeah, really looking forward to that.
Oh, that's so good. I am so happy that you're going to be going and doing that because I know that it is an epic trip and it's a difficult one. It is a tricky one, but I think you're going to have the best time. And when you come back, you'll have to share your experience of that with us because that would be really cool. So stay safe, have the best time, and let us know how that goes. There are two final questions that I've got that I am asking everybody who comes onto the podcast. And I haven't given you any warning for these, so I will give you a bit of time to think about them if you want it. But I'm quite keen to get your initial, sort of off the top of your head answer. Now, the first question is, what's one moment from your travels that has changed the way you see the world?
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. You're really making me think. I feel like my whole life is flashing before my eyes here. One of the more extraordinary moments of my life would be in New Zealand last year. I did a paragliding trip, and it was the highest I'd ever been in my paraglider, and we were super high up in the sky, just looking down on the Southern Alps mountain range. And I think it's one thing to climb a mountain and to look at the world from the peak of a mountain, but then to be like that mountain times five above it and then looking down on the whole range. That, I guess this is really taking your question literally, like changing my what am I trying to say, like, yeah, a different view on the world, but it really was a different view of the world. And that was a crazy moment because it just makes you feel so small, like you've got this bit of material that's keeping you in the sky. It's quite interesting fruity conditions up in the sky, and you're in this little armchair looking down on the world, being like, I could fall out of the sky right now, but I am floating through it. And that was a moment I'll never forget. And it was also something, I think that was one of the bravest moments of my life because I I was scared, and I overcame my fear to do that and to get that high, and to experience that moment. And so yeah, it was a real like overcoming of fears, and just looking at this absolutely insanely beautiful world in a way that you can yeah it was awesome.
That's a perfect answer. That's a brilliant answer. And I love the way that you've interpreted that. People can interpret that question in different ways. And I really like the fact that you've been able to offer a perspective that realistically very few people are going to be able to give. I think that's quite unique. Now, the final question, sometimes related, um, but it's what has adventure travel taught you that nothing else in life has? So what's something
Mm.
that through your adventures you feel like that has taught you that you can't replicate in a classroom or anywhere else?
I love that question. And I think it's a really important question because I think it teaches you so much, really. I don't think there's any particular thing, but I know that in my everyday life, I feel like life is a sum of the adventures that you have, and every single thing leads towards specific moments. And I think it just helps any challenge that comes at you in life. It just makes you more resilient to dealing with it. And I remember certain times feeling out of my depth, or being like, I don't know how to do this, or or like how am I going to solve this one or get through that one. And I think the more adventure you do, because nothing is ever as it seems in the outdoors, and you have to be adaptive. You have to change the plan all the time, and it just helps you. I think it just helps you kind of take a bit more of like an easy perspective with things. And I think now I kind of go into things expecting already that it's probably not going to, like, something might not work out how I planned it to. So I need to be ready for plan B or C or D, and not for that to be like a surprise or to catch me off guard, and to kind of welcome that challenge. And I think before I was fearful of challenges like that, whereas now I'm just like, come at me, like I'm ready for this next one. And whether that's just like a random kind of software coding thing in my working life, or if it's like an actual real life or death situation in the next adventure, like in the Varangia Arctic Kite Enduro. But yeah, that felt like the sum of it for me, that competition, because it was, each challenge was very welcomed. Whereas I think like even a few years ago or 5 years ago, I would have kind of crawled up into a ball and be like, I don't know how to deal with this. So yeah, resilience, I guess, is the big word I would take from that.
That is an incredible answer as well. I think resilience is so important in this day and age, with everything getting easier and everything getting more convenient in terms of, you can order food off your phone and you've got hot water as soon as the tap turns on. And a lot of people I've seen, it ruins their entire day if they miss the bus. And it's something that I've really taken away with me from my experiences, is what you've said, that, okay, plans change, we move on.
Mm.
Let's not ruin the entire day over it. You need to be able to be resilient to adversity and susceptible to change, and just roll with it, just go with it. I think that's such a key thing that people can really, really take away from adventure travel. And you don't have to go a million miles to do that. You can find that by exploring the UK. I know you spend a lot of your time on the south coast and the southwest. Down there, there's a beautiful part of the world. You can experience that same, or you can learn those same lessons that adventure travel teaches you, I think, by even going down to the coast or up into the Peak District, the Lake District, Wales. And then on top of that, you can then go out to Machu Picchu, Everest Base Camp, Kilimanjaro, and get those in a slightly more extreme way. Um, but no, what an answer. That's fantastic. Well, Jemima, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me and everybody listening about your latest adventure. I definitely will be getting you back if you are open to it, to talk about all the other stuff. Stay safe at K2 Base Camp and have the best time. And I'm sure we'll catch up again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks again. Take care.